Yeah. Yeah, I'll take a look at the email when I get a chance. I guess make some notes for today. Man, I was working on my WTC here. Finally sacked up and put it in the tub, to leak test the thing, and it was did the bubble check. I had like a tube going in, for the antenna, so it was just a little bit of bulb. There were some bubbles coming out of there when I was under pressure. So I did your technique with the brass tube, fuel line, cap on the end, much better. But where I was getting leaks is around the double O-rings on the ends. So I know with your WTC, it seals, on the caps, whereas Dave's are the rings on the inside. So when I feel inside that Lexon tube, it's very irregular inside that tube. And I've got another one that's actually smooth. So I got some thicker O-rings, 50A. I'm a fucking goddamn O-ring expert now after trying to figure all that out. But yeah, got some big smushy ones to put in there, and it took care of that. And dude,
yeah, then I actually just went through that with my cylinders. I was originally supplying them with I think 70 durometer, and I was having a pain in the ass sealing it. I switched to 50, and they're perfect now.
Yeah, mine are. The other thing too is taking your advice. I took the Dremel tool and beveled the edges pretty deep on the edges of Lexon tubes. Then 600, 1,000, 3,000 sandpaper, got it all sanded down, get rid of any burrs. Silicone the grease the hell out of it, and it slid on just no problem. And then with the 50A or durometer, it smushed down, and it is tight seal now, which is good.
Do you feel 50 is more compliant, guys, for a better seal on that poor tolerance with the inside of the cylinders?
Yep.
Yeah. Take a look at this. I'm sorry. I'll let Bob go. But
no, I was just gonna say, yeah, the hard durometer, obviously, it doesn't conform to the inside as much, so the sealing surface area is reduced. So with the softer stuff, it just mushes in and makes a larger surface area for that seal.
Could that be the silver bullet to the answer for that?
Potentially. I mean, obviously, Dave has probably played around with this a lot, but the big issue is obviously that inside tolerance is left, right, and center, depending on what batch and what manufacturer and all of that stuff.
You can see here, Ed, this is one end here, and these were the ones that were in there already. And this side was pretty tight as it was. But as I move down the WTC here, you can see on this side here, see that one right there?
Yeah.
That's the 50A, and it was a different size, and they're all like 135, 037. There's like some kind of standard size per O-ring, which is a ratio of the thickness and all that bullshit. And you can see the same thing here. That one's smushed down. It was actually not that hard to put them on, and it creates a hell of a great seal here. So I really had no issues there.
That's crazy. Look at that seal surface. Looks like it's a 1/4 of an inch wide.
Yeah, exactly. Dave, I see Dave's on now. He's calling me, I don't know, king of Planet O-ring or some damn thing. I can't remember. But
you're looking good, Blondie.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. I bought, that was the thing too about these O-rings. I just got online and I bought like a bunch of different ones, so there was like the standard size, and then I got another group, and those are the ones that I used eventually. And I had bought these, but you can see they're thick as hell. I'm never gonna be able to use those, but we're pretty cheap, and so I learned something.
Very good. Love it.
At least it's an alternative. I mean, maybe it's a stopgap measure till you're up at, if people are having a problem, maybe they can try the 50 and see if that makes a difference.
Well, I just think that, there's varying tolerances. So you got to play with it and to get it right is what I'm realizing.
Yep, absolutely.
Hey, question for you. Bought some of this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I originally did some silicone on the battery that I bought from you, standard lipo. I siliconed it and I wrapped it in electric tape. I thought about taping it off and just dipping the hell out of this thing. I assume you guys have used this before?
I have. Now, you said you used electrical tape on there. I would not probably recommend that unless it's for like actual physical protection for the battery. I would actually recommend like a heat shrink, because that would be a one continuous, body around the end. The only thing you need to worry about are the two ends. I mean, it'll probably work, but I think over time you'll find that, the adhesive on the tape will probably start letting go, or if you snag a corner, moving the battery around, it could lift.
It's going to dry out.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
it's more protective. I mean, I took silicone sealant and just silicone the shit out of this thing. And then I wrapped the tape around it just to hold all of it kind of together. And then, I did this like a year ago. And now that Dave is rubbing off on me, I'm like, I probably need to do something a little more refined than this. So that's why
You're gonna over time you're gonna want to replace that.
Roger. Okay. The other thing I thought about too is, anybody taken this, created a mold of the shape of the inside of the hull, and then in turn put this in, poured resin with some lead around it to create just an insert that goes in there, so it's not only weighted but it's also fits the concave shape of that hull. Do you see what I'm saying?
How does it affect the ballast?
Well, that's the thing too I wanted to talk about too, as I'm about ready now that I was telling Bob, I finally sacked up and finally got this thing in the tub this last week and got it waterproofed. I was talking to Dave, and he was giving me some guidance, and I was also reading the book about trimming. Started thinking about CG, holding the boat up, say on the knife edge of your hand to figure where the CG is, fill the ballast tank, put underwater, and push it down with one finger so it's balanced that direction, the center of buoyancy is. Try to figure out where to put the weight to match the two, then go into the rest of the trimming routine. I wanted to put a post on the forum, but I mean, what's your guys' thoughts on that? That kind of leads into what you were just asking.
I don't know that I completely followed your idea about creating a mold, I guess, for the inside of the boat and the battery. Can you run through that again?
Yeah, sure. So the battery, I'm going to sit in the bottom of the boat, right? And this will help with the center of gravity. Well, my thought was, rather than sit in the bottom of the boat, and I need to put some lead weights in there anyways. I thought, well, if I could figure out how much weight to put in the boat, say a couple pounds or whatever, I could, take a mold of the bottom of the hull, right? Set this in there, put the lead weight in there, then case that with resin so that you have a mold that conforms to the shape of the hull, encapsulates the weights as well as the battery. Now it's just one assembly. You just plop in or plop out, maybe with like a frame on the front to hold it in place. And then, then your WTC goes on top to hold it in place. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, I mean, that would probably work. In my mind, though, I'm a huge fan of modularity. Is that a word? Modularity.
Yeah.
What you're talking about, Dave did. He's in the I guess that wasn't really fitting kits, but he would make weight kits for like the Gatto and the Rebelle Type 7. So he created a mold, and then he would make these form-fitted cast weights that would drop down and they would fit flush with the bottom.
Yeah.
In my mind, something, if you went through all that trouble, encapsulating your battery and everything, what happens when your battery dies? Now you've got to go through the whole process all over again. I would just be more of a fan of having your weights, one unit, drop it down, whatever you want to do, take your battery, that's one unit, drop it down.
No, yeah, you're exactly right, Bob. That's very practical. I was thinking truly about, the aesthetics and just plopping that thing in there, but you're right. I mean, how long does a LiPo last for? How many times can you charge and discharge this thing?
It depends how nice you are to it. If you're out there at full throttle for half an hour and you drive it down to like 3.5 volts, it's not going to be super happy with you. But if you nurse it and balance all the cells every time you come back, I mean, it could last for years and years and years.
Gotcha. So back to the Plastidip thing. I think this will fit in there, but I mean, can we just dip this thing? Is that what you guys did?
You can, yeah, sure. Sure
Right.
you can.
I'm gonna dip the shit out of this thing and waterproof that to make sure it doesn't blow up on me.
I
Back
don't
to the-
even dip lithium polymers. I have yet to have a catastrophic event.
Well, there we go.
They come pre-shrink wrapped, right? With heat shrink. You just got to make sure the water doesn't get, on the inside of it.
Well, I let the water get in on the inside, and by that I mean up to the packaging of the electrolyte. That is the only barrier I worry about. And if that is breached, you're going to have a fire and conflagration anyway.
So Dave, are you saying you just run your lipos wet? You just drop them in there and...
When I do, I don't make any heroic efforts to make anything watertight because I want to be able to dry it out, not leave it over a season sitting in the shop becoming a tropical forest of mung. Which is what happens if you encapsulate, because it's never perfect. Water's going to get in there.
Would it be better then to actually strip the heat shrink off and just leave those cells kind of open?
Yes.
No shit. All right. Well,
I need to try.
Of course, the first guy to have a house fire is going to sue my ass, right?
That is super interesting. We have like a whole shit ton of batteries. I'm just going to grab a couple. Jason, we're going to do this next week, and we're going to just throw it in.
We're going to do it at your house, Jason.
We'll do it in the test tank, and we'll just see what happens.
that's a great idea. Just throw it in there. So, all right, well, shit, I'll just go with this as it is. I'll just have to build a balloon or something on the end to seal that, charging port, but that's no big deal. Back to the trimming center gravity, center buoy. I know there's different schools of thoughts, and I don't want to throw a grenade into the room here because I know I am. I read your portion of the book on that, Bob. I've talked to Dave about this. Dave hasn't written a book because I know you guys have differing viewpoints on this. So I read that passage. But here's my thoughts on this was I agree absolutely with the center of gravity being well below the center of buoyancy, so the boat will right itself. I get that. But I also think, correct me if I'm wrong, the center of gravity should fall on the same plane as the center of buoyancy. Otherwise, when you are, I don't know, I suppose underwater or neutral buoyancy, it's like a pendulum. The boat would want to go nose down if the center of gravity was forward of the center of buoyancy, or go nose up if it was aft of the center of buoyancy. So you got to align those and then go into the procedure of the foam deal, either raising or lowering above the waterline to adjust it, or doing the surface submerged portion. What's your guys'
Mike,
thoughts
let
on
me
that?
cut through all this with a simple statement.
Sure.
Static stability submerged or surfaced is achieved only when the vertical component of gravity and the vertical component of the opposing force, which is buoyancy, are in alignment. When they are in alignment, it's up to you where you place that center of gravity and center of buoyancy, where the keel is. Ideally, the keel will be perpendicular to the vertical line. That's what we consider a zero bubble. But if you screw it all up and you leave the model alone and it's on its side or upside down in stable, it is statically stable, just not where you want it to be. You control its orientation by the placement, the relationship between the center of gravity and center of buoyancy, and they are fixed.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, I am totally aligned with you, Dave. That makes total sense then.
And the other thing to realize is, this isn't a all or nothing scenario. That center of buoyancy is the collection of all buoyant forces. So the center of buoyancy could be in the middle of the boat, but it's achieved by foam, for example, on the opposite ends of the boat.
Right.
The forces are all still aligned, but it's not necessarily one buoyant force. It's the collection of all buoyant forces netting out
the vector sum of all of the forces is a resultant of one spot where they all collect.
Yep.
So question, center of gravity, just like a model airplane, model rocket, model rocket has center of pressure, not center of buoyancy, but either way, submarine, a rock, a log, if I pick it up, balance it on my hand, I can figure out, where that center of gravity is.
That's where
now,
it is.
Absolutely. Now I take the submarine, ballast tank full of water, put it fully underwater, then I hold it down and I put my finger in a spot. So as it's trying to rise, it doesn't, but it doesn't move. It's like doing that center of gravity reverse. I assume that's how I would be able to find where the center of buoyancy is on the model.
You just do that by trial and error during your trimming,
Yeah,
which is why you keep the buoyant element wild until you've established its longitudinal position.
Say that one more time, Dave, so I can assimilate.
All right, you fix your center of gravity. You don't play with it anymore.
Got it.
Now, this is where Bob and I depart as far as the process of trimming. Correct me if I'm wrong, Bob, Bob will trim, surface trim first, and then trim submerged. I'm the other school. I first establish the amount of foam I need to get to neutral buoyancy. That's done with a flooded ballast tank, of course. And then I move that fixed amount of foam longitudinally until the center of buoyancy is now at that model's center of gravity. And that's when it assumes an even keel, or if you will, the keel line is perpendicular to the force lines.
I am following you. So I don't need to determine the center of buoyancy ahead of time to figure out how far it's displaced laterally.
That's
from the center of
established through experiment.
Yep.
Got it. I'm totally on board with you now. Yeah, I totally understand now. Okay.
I have spoken.
Trimming, and we've said this before, it's like 50% art and it's 50% science. You can do all the calculations you want, but until you throw it in the water, you don't really know what it's going to do. So it's, you do the best you can, you get as close as you can. Sometimes it works out perfectly. I was going to do a trimming video on an upholder. I threw some foam in there and I'm like, okay, guys, this is the first time it's been in the tank. Let's see what happens. I threw it in and it was perfect. I'm like, well, this was a short video. I'm sorry. After a while, you get good at it. But
It made me sick, Bob.
Nobody likes a show off, Bob.
Typically, it could take days because you're going to get close.
Yeah.
And then you bit it on the bench and you secure it. And then you put it in and you do a little foam, a little weight, and you keep playing with it. Like when I sell the boats that I do, they're 95% there. You can always make it a little better, but they're 95% of the way there.
One other question I have. So I went ahead and I got my wiring together inside here, and it's not necessarily super neat, but you can see I kind of got it coiled up there and everything's kind of in place. I've soldered everything, shrink wrapped it. I did some super glue to kind of seal things in. I have these connectors in here too, like little JR connectors, whatever the hell they are.
Yep.
Bob, I was reading in your book that you're kind of like, you don't have to get it too watertight for the LEDs, because you may wear out the anode a little bit, but eventually, but you don't have to be too anal about it. So what's your guys' school? Do I have to make sure this thing is no shit waterproof, all this wiring, or as long as it's pretty good, I'm all right?
And honestly, David told me this, and we just talked about this for the batteries. It's almost worse to try and make it perfectly waterproof, because what you're going to do is you're going to make it almost waterproof. Water's going to get in, and then because you've made it almost waterproof, that water is going to sit in there for weeks and weeks and weeks until it dries out.
Water / electrolyte.
Yep. If you just leave it open, as soon as you get it out, within 10 minutes it's dry. So I would just leave it open. Protect your positive terminals if you want to select them. But for that low voltage and the low amperage we're running through our boats, it's not critical to seal them hermetically. Okay.
Gotcha. All right. I'm pretty satisfied. I just wasn't sure how that's ass I needed to be. So that answers my question. So one, I got my damn mass work, and I just want everybody to show these fuckers work. They don't get stuck anymore. Good to go. Jeez. Okay, get off my back now, God damn
it. You're faking that.
Hey, so here's another question. So when I was at Deep Submergence Unit, a lot of the components, like for the cameras that are outside the DSV and the DSRV, some of the arm components and things like that were not pressure compensated, that were no shit seal penetrations, that type of stuff. we'd work on them, calibrate them, do whatever we had to do, get everything all set. And then we would purge the interior with nitrogen, very low humidity nitrogen, and then purge all that out, then close it up. Now, this may be a little bit anal, but with the inside of the WTC, I mean, I don't know if that's available somewhere. And you know, and if you do get a little water, you get condensation in there. I assume would it be prevented by that? Is it even worth doing? Has anybody ever done that? Does it matter?
That is very anal and unnecessary.
Okay, we're not diving to 12,000 feet here, right? So,
No, we're not.
okay, Roger. I thought about that this last week when I was getting some water and I got some condensation. That's how we prevented it in the real world, and I wasn't sure if anybody.
You are a first-class twidget.
God damn right, man.
If you want to,
Sub safe.
if you want to get anal, just plug the cylinder up and fill the whole thing with mineral oil and cap the ends. Now you're good.
That's what I'm working on next.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
That's no shit in the world. Yeah.
We did that in the 90s with the stuff. All it did was turn the liquid black because of the motor windings. The carbon brushes made the liquid black after a while.
Yeah, well,
That's
trimming's
not
a
worth
bitch
it.
too.
Really?
Yeah, I mean,
Pop it open and let it dry out. Done.
Couple toys I got. So I found this at the hobby store, like a little motor, right? The whole thing's in like Chinese, but it's small. I'm gonna play around with this a little bit.
I got those.
You got one of those?
Yep.
Yeah.
That's to me a
Then I bought a PPM encoder. So going out of a pulse width modulated receiver into a little board, and then that can go into one input into a Pixhawk or a S-Bus reader or something like that. So I thought that was kind of cool. I'm gonna play around with that too.
I've used a few of those.
You use Arduino though, don't you?
Yeah, but I wound up picking up a couple different brands of those the things that you just showed.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember, that was about a year or more ago, but I wound up not using it because the number of channels I was trying to use didn't equal the outputs on that, and it wreaked all kinds of havoc.
Oh, really? Huh.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure out how to read, read in pulse was easy, but then if you have a PPM coming in, how do you know from the timing of the first pulse through how many you have, where each one starts over the 20 millisecond duty cycle? And I haven't figured that out yet.
Yeah, I saw there's a way to do it with a scope. Again, that was brain cells ago. Hasn't been that long, but it's been a lot of brain cells.
Yeah, another thing, and I'll shut up then, I'm sorry, is I was talking to a guy that Dave introduced me to, and the Futaba receiver out of the pulse width channels that come out of there, he hooked it up to no scope because he was having some difficulty with his submarine from 2001, the one they did at Groton that was kind of automated. He was saying that those Futaba receivers don't send those pulse width modulated signals all at the same time. They'll do it like the odd ones and then switch over to the even ones. So it's somehow sharing those. So that could screw up your timing as you're sampling those if you're trying to read it with Arduino or something like that. I haven't looked at it yet, but I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, and actually depending on the Futaba receiver, some of them you can open up the case and kind of hijack that signal. There's a couple videos out there how to do it. God, I was deep in all this about a year and a half ago.
That's where you get the RSSI out of that Futaba receiver if you want to tap into it. But I was doing a little research on that. Yeah.
Yeah, but where I was going with this is some of the later, larger or more multi-channel, receivers. You can't hijack them. They changed all of that. It's almost impossible.
No shit. Well, I'm pretty happy with what I got going so far in this thing with the automated routine. I'm going to keep working on it though. So anyways, those are all my questions. Guys, sorry to hijack the first part of the meeting.
Yeah.
I got one question.
Or you got to put another quarter in.
I'm getting my 50
Hey,
bucks worth, Bob. Damn it.
Oh, jeez. $50. Jeez. That
Wait a second.
connector
We
that
take 50 bucks times 2 years divided by all the meetings. How much is that per meeting? Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, we should do meetings even more often and really get our money's worth.
I'm just going to charge you for every good tip you take away. Then it'll be thousands of dollars a year.
Damn it.
Should have kept your mouth shut, Mike.
Atlas Shrugged. And Rand, Dave. And Rand.
Hey, Mike,
Yes,
what's
sir.
that connect? Is that an Amphenol connector you're using on the LiPo?
This is the one Bob sold me. It's the waterproof to plug waterproof deal here. I just went ahead and cut it and soldered it onto this deal.
Okay.
Can you see it okay?
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with those. I was gonna say if it's the Amphenol ones, where that rubber sheathing goes into the molded plastic part, that is not. They rate their connectors at some of them at IP67, some of them at IP68.
Yeah.
It's really important to pay attention if that is either connected or non-connected, where that rating comes from. But what I can say is where that plastic sheathing meets the molded part, that is not watertight.
Oh, right here.
Yeah, on the Amphenol ones. I'm not saying that on Bob's.
I think those ones are all molded kind of in one piece, but that'd be a good thing to double check.
Yeah, this looks pretty tight here, but thank you. I'll take a look here. It was funny you say that because yesterday I had this hooked up to the WTC and I was wrenching it all around. I got a little bit of flutter and I think I was this was getting a little loose is what it was doing between the plugs in here. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, there's some of those connectors, there's a little O-ring inside of them. And I try not to leave, how to put this? I make the connection, but then I try and have that connection braced somehow so that you don't tweak that connector sideways or a little bit to squish the O-ring inside a little more on one side than the other. Because that also, I've noticed in pressure testing, that does make a difference.
Got it.
Yeah, these connectors, if you're not familiar, they've got like a pin that goes into a receiver. So you've got that transverse load is absorbed, and then you've got a collar that screws in and pulls it tight so the faces are sealing against each other. You would have to really reef on that, I think, to get that uneven O-ring.
I'm more speaking just to be clear. I'm more speaking about the Amphenol connectors, because those, they don't screw together. It's like a push click sort of thing, and then you got to rotate the collar and then pull it out. They're pretty trick for fast, speedy connections. There's just a couple ins and outs about using them.
Yeah.
Hey, another question for you. So I know this is kind of probably hard to see, but the depth cruiser's right there, right? And it routes out, and I got a standpipe here at the front. I put this in the tub. I assume if you get water up in here and it runs all the way up the depth cruiser, is that bad or does that matter?
No, it's all sealed. I'm pretty sure it terminates in like a membrane of some kind, so it's
yeah. Okay, I capped the end and I wasn't sure. I was like, shit, I didn't make. The standpipe's there to create the pressure and the air above it, right? The inches mercury, whatever the hell it's measuring. And I was worried that if I got water in there, it was going to jack something up. Okay.
No, you're good. Kevin knows what he's doing.
Raj, okay. All right. Check.
So I had something interesting happen. So I'm working on a 72nd scale Seawolf, an old HMK Creations 172nd Seawolf kit. Beautiful kit, by the way. I got it from Eric at Subfest a while back, but like a year and a half ago. But at any rate, the new owner wanted a stern thruster in there. So Jason and I put a Robosh thruster in there. And it's not the paddle style, if you guys are familiar with them. It has like a paddle that splashes water left and right. This one actually has a right angle gearbox that drives 2 brass propellers inside the tube. We tested it, everything is working fine. I pulled out the brushed motor and we put a brushless motor in there. It was turning and spinning beautifully, secured it in place, tested it, and it ran wonderfully for what, maybe 10 or 15 seconds, and then ceased. And it was the weirdest thing. We would stop and then we would try it again, and it would run for 5 or 10 seconds and then cease. But what was happening, it has a stainless shaft that has like brass bushings that it rides in. And the little bit of friction between the shaft and the bushing caused the bushing to expand, and it would grab the shaft. And then we wait and it would cool down and it would release, and then it would be fine again. So this, of course, was after everything was like epoxied into place. So I had to cut it free, pull it out, disassemble the whole stern thruster, and then lubricate, you know, all the bushings and bearings and everything inside, and then reassemble it. So what we thought we had licked ended up with like a 1.5-day project of refitting and retrofitting, but just an interesting
Did you
problem.
rebore it to make it a sloppier fit?
It could do. Honestly, I think between the grease and the fact that when it actually runs in the water will cool the bushing. I think we'll probably be okay. But just like I didn't even think about that being a problem, and we couldn't figure out what it was because it would spin freely when it was out. And then when we finally took it out, we put it on the voltage and ran it, and it would go and go and go and then cease. So
Were the bushings oil lights? Was it a sintered bearing?
no,
Bob, did you say, did I hear you correctly? You switched from a brush motor to a brushless motor?
Yep.
Could the RPM be above the rating of it?
I mean, that's certainly possible. I don't think the RPMs that were in there would exceed the you know, the capabilities of that system. I'd have to check the brush motor setup. We've got it set up on a speed controller, so it's all variable. We can limit it to whatever we want.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I would just have thought it might have been a higher RPM for the given voltage.
No, when we were testing it, it was probably at like 1/3 throttle. So I don't think it was like melting anything.
What did that cost you?
I got it. Well, I actually just looked it up. So I think those paddle style Robosch thrusters, if you buy them from Robosch, are like $50. This one is more expensive. I think it's more like 90 or 100 when you buy it out of Germany. They're beautiful little units, but I mean, a little pricey.
Okay, thank you.
You don't need to worry about that, Steve. You got a whole gigantic cavernous hull. Just get a couple bilge thrusters and your bilge pumps, and you're good to go.
Yeah, that's all I need.
Public service announcement. And look, I'm new at this, so you guys probably know this, but I'm just probably reiterating something that everybody knows already. But how, you know, crimper, right? You guys seen this for these RC servo deals? Holy Christ, I didn't realize how sensitive those little deals are. And if you don't get them just right, my ballast servo every now would flutter. I'm like, what the frick is going on with this thing? So I had it apart the other day, and I pulled that out, and I had a servo tester. And I was testing all the way through the 2IS and the BLM and all this baloney. Finally back to that connector, and it was just the little tab was just misaligned a little bit in there, and that was enough to cause it to kind of flutter if, you know, it had flexed or whatever. So it's just really sensitive. So anyways, just my there I was story that, you know, if I would have been one, I guess, a little bit more trained in how to do those, but if I had a little more experience, I'd have been a little more you know, precise with how I did them initially, I would have saved myself a lot of work. So it was just public service announcement.
You cut the end off and trimmed it back and put the new pins on. Is that what you did?
Yeah, right. I was trying to, you know, make the servo lead shorter, you know, so everything fit together better. And, you know, yeah, cut it, trim it. You know, I got the whole kit from Hanson Hobbies and everything. And then you learn to do that, crimp all this stuff. And anyways, I come to find I found several bad ones that now that I'm getting better at this, I realize I screwed those up. hell, I just found one the other day that was just tweaked just a little bit, and sure enough, it was creating a problem for me, but it's fixed now. I guess the PSA here is, as you guys probably know, and I'm probably speaking and telling you something you already know, is just be super anal about those when you crimp those and put them in to save yourself a hassle.
I'm looking at the participants on this Zoom call, and you're addressing maybe 4 guys.
No, I don't. I can't see my. My phone only shows a couple dudes here. But anyways,
what you said is actually great. That's a good thing to think about. So, trimming back those really long servo leads is a great idea to save up real estate and make things neater inside the cylinder. I personally don't like replace the pins and recrimp new connections. I'll do one of 2 things. I will just cut the wires and resplice the wires because I can see those connections and make sure that it's a good wet solder. Or if that's not a nice one, the other thing that I'll do is I'll actually solder those pins to the end of the wires and press them in. I don't screw around with those crimpy things. I've told you guys.
Oh, no shit.
Huh?
So no shit, you just solder that. You don't even crimp. You just solder the shit and just stick it in there.
Yep.
Mike, those crimpers that you
Yes,
have on the teeth of them is each. It looks like you guys got the style that has 3 different positions.
Right, right.
Looking across those teeth, is there should be a step, like one at each position. There should be a slightly taller part of the tooth and a slightly lower part of the tooth. Is that
right?
Like that? Is that like that on those?
Yeah, you can see. I don't know if people probably know this, but I don't know if it's focusing it. But it's each one of those is a different size. And
yeah,
Different style crimps.
Yeah, I just said it's important, I bring that up because it's for crimping those ends. You got to have that whether it's a male or female pin that you're crimping on there, you got to have that set in there on the right steps.
Right, and then you got to get in that little ledge, and then I'm crimping and I'm cutting these fuckers off, and I didn't know what was going on, and the wires are getting shorter and shorter, and I'm throwing this through the window. It was a real learning curve. I'll just say that.
Well, that type of connector, the crimps 2 things. On the outside, it's crimping the insulator. On the inside, it's crimping the conductor. And that's where you got to be careful, is you just strip away just enough of the metal to reach the crimp side that is metal, and that you leave enough insulation to get crimped on the outside.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's why I don't screw around with. I'm sure, if you did this thing lots, you'd get really, really good at it. But for the few times, not a few times, for the occasional time that I mess around with that, I'm just like, I'm going to snip it and solder it, and I'll be done in 5 minutes. I'm not going to screw around with machines and crimpers and all that crap. And I know it'll work every time.
Have you seen how many wires I got going on in that contraption I made?
That's sick.
What did you make, Nick? What's your deal? What was that?
Oh, no, it's just a one-off watertight cylinder that has all the Arduino and gyros and other junk stuffed in there. But
Nick, you are the illegitimate son of Manfred.
Nah.
Hey, I was just thinking, Bob, are we gonna do Georgia in September, or are we gonna find a place in Texas for a Subfest thing, or what are you planning?
I think as of right now, we haven't locked it in. There's a lot of balls up in the air with that, but I have no plans on moving the venue from Cohutta. I mean, it was just so awesome. I honestly couldn't see it, and it's a nice centralish location for everybody on the East Coast. But I could certainly see like peripheral or additional get-togethers. I think the overarching vision or hope would be that we could have an East Coast event, a West Coast event, and then maybe potentially a central event. And that could be either an event through the Nautilus Drydocks or through the subcommittee or a combination thereof. But I really want to try and make sure that people, regardless of where they're situated within the country, have a regatta within a doable drive from where they're at. I'm utterly flabbergasted and thankful at the passion that people have had to drive like from Nevada to Georgia for an event. It's pretty gratifying to see that kind of passion, or Utah, over. But it's not ideal for them, obviously. So we want to try and get more going on. But to answer your question, yeah, it's as of right now, we're still queued up for third week of September in Kahata for Subfest.
Okay, just help me out, brother. My anniversary is September 18th. So as long as it's outside that window, plus or minus a few days, that would help me a lot. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, I'll take that into consideration.
Thank you, sir.
Hey, Nick, I got a question for you.
Yeah,
all
shoot.
out wiring, how are you terminating it? Do you have wire harnessing? How are you dealing with that? Because you were saying you have a nightmare in there. And
it's tight. I'm anal, dude. It's tight.
I hear you.
There's no extra loose wire there.
Well, the reason why I'm asking, I'd love to see it, is I think, and I was talking to Bob. When I showed you those Wagan connectors. One of the toughest things is you get all these different components from different manufacturers that have different lead lengths. Like one speed controller will come with this set of lead lengths, and a motor will come with that long wiring, pigtails, and you try to harness this thing all together. What do you use? How do you bus your plus rail to your negative to your ground rail? Those are things that really make not only make a nice looking professional boat, that you've handled that rat's nest of spaghetti, or how do people do that? Plus, when it comes to maintenance or trying to figure out what you did in the first place, troubleshooting.
Yep.
See, that it's nice to see that. I don't think people spend as much thought on that. They just kind of solder things or.
Nah, one thing.
I'd like to see that.
Can you guys see that?
Yep. Well, there you go. Yeah, your positive bus rail, your negative bus rail. Yeah.
And that positive bus rail is actually, I can't hold this thing and point at the same time, but that positive bus rail is there's part of it's 12 volt, part of it's 5 volt.
Sure.
All the negatives out here. Let me see. I'm trying to line this up with the camera. This little one here, that's a 5 volt. Same grounds. There's a lot of stuff kind of packed in there.
Is that, did you create that sled, Nick, or where'd that sled come from?
No, it's all custom made.
Oh, you're a stud, dude.
It's all one off.
Back to the electrical. Where'd you source all those buses or the terminal blocks? They look like Phoenix connectors or something.
Yeah, that's a great. So let me try and turn this around. I kind of figure out. Well, the terminal blocks, I get them either from DigiKey, Newark, or even just Amazon. And so what I actually do, there's a whole in-depth build of this is like version 2, but there's a whole in-depth build of this on the Nautilus Drydocks. It's called hybrid. I think it was like hybrid ballast something or other. I think it was like last year. But it shows the whole build and all the different components. But like these, let me flip this over. These terminal blocks here, these are actually all connected together by a printed circuit board. And then that just holds the terminal, locks everything in place. And then I actually put a heavy gauge wire to connect all the pins together, to bus all those together as well. There's more detail about that on the Drydocks forum. But in this case, Ed, all the high voltage or high power stuff here is on one side of this brick. And then all the data, if you can see that, sorry if I'm moving the camera.
Right.
So all the data stuff is spread far away from it. And originally how this worked is this lead, there's a 3-pin connector. We have a common ground, 5 volt and a 12 volt that would go forward to the next, it'd go through the ballast tank like Dave and Bob do.
Right.
And that would connect everything up in front. And then this data cable also had a thing that would go through another conduit, separating again the power from the data, keeping a
Right.
good
Keep the
separation.
noisy signals away from your
Yeah.
critical signals.
Yeah. And
As
so,
best as you could in that tight spot.
yeah. And what I'm doing now is I've done something because I just hell bent on not getting this stupid sub in the water. What I did now, I basically took this stuff without redesigning it too much. And I'm actually running everything out in the wet now, or as far as the power and the data cables. And this is kind of the new, so what you're seeing here, that's this. Here's the new ballast tank, and here's the new forward compartment. But all the data is, instead of running through a conduit in the inside of the we're passing through the ballast tank,
Right.
it's all run outside of the boat, and that's using, sorry, it's kind of a disaster over here.
It still looks sick. It looks good.
But see, here's like the main data cable that hooks up down here. These, you're familiar with this. These 2mm bullet connectors, slipping silicone on them. That's for these two servos back here.
That's sweet.
All of this mess in here. Oh shit! Sorry, I'm trying to. That all gets filled.
Does WOW sum this up?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you got it. You got it.
So this all gets filled with that potting epoxy. So that's the front one, and then shit. What else we got going on here?
You got torpedoes in the front of that thing? Is that what that is?
Yep.
Damn, dude.
If our enemies had this technology in World War II, there would have been a different outcome.
Yeah. My grandfather was high up in the submarine part of the in World War II, and the design and all that. Anyway, that's the rear torpedo tube. But this new watertight cylinder, I don't want to burn up with the whole DiveTribe thing here, but so you can basically just grab this whole watertight cylinder. I'm trying to do this one-handed, but you just pull it back. Right now that I'm trying to do this one-handed, it's like those masks. Okay, anyway, you pull the thing back, you can take the whole thing out. There's alignment pins, or sorry, you can kind of see those alignment pins, but this stuff lives in the wet. And then this guy,
That's why we need engineering awards, Bob.
Mm-hmm. Well, he's got to finish it first. It's got to work before he qualifies.
So this whole thing just pulls apart.
This is sick. You don't want to put this in the water.
Yeah. Anyway, so
it belongs in the Louvre.
This is just intimidating.
Wow.
Anyway, so this thing just clicks. See how it just clicks together. Anyway,
Yeah, just like
servos
that. Yeah.
all the shit. But I designed it so that basically this is the only thing that you pull out of the boat. The rest of this stuff just lives in the boat.
Do you 3D print those parts? You do CAD and then 3D print those pieces, or how do you do that?
I design everything in SolidWorks 3D. And then I print them here.
Got it. Okay.
I loathe you.
Can we get him kicked out?
I don't know. Hey, Ed.
Bob, refund his $49.
It's gorgeous work. It really is. It's beautiful.
Here's that pressure compensated servo.
Look at that.
God.
See, now, Bob, what'd you say the difference between hobby guys and guys that take it to the next level?
Yeah, there's people who are in the hobby, and then there's people who drive the hobby. And
yes.
Yeah.
I drive the short bus.
DC bus to Washington.
Well, and David has talked about this before, and the thing I love about Nick and other people on the forum is not only are they doing this, but they're documenting it. a lot of people will just do it, and then they'll kind of like show it to everybody, and everybody will ooh and ah, but they don't really tell you how it's done because they want to keep it close to their chest. But to share this information out, to take the time to document it, that is what's really, really awesome. And I don't do as good of a job on the forums as I should, but I try and use YouTube as much as possible. So
Well, seeing it firsthand, and actually instead of staring at pictures, but actually watching a video is pretty darn helpful.
Yeah. Where do you live at, Nick? I mean, you don't have to tell me specifically, but are you anywhere close to Virginia? Are you within a few hours?
No, I'm in stupid California, but
Geez.
I live up in the Sierra Mountains near Lake Tahoe.
Oh, beautiful area. Yeah, really, really nice up there.
Yeah, Tahoe is about a 45-minute drive from my house, and then if I want to deal with the city folks, that's about another 45-minute drive.
Got it. Sure.
Nice spot. Hey, Nick, just one quick question. With those 3D printed ballast tank components, the end caps and things like that, are you just running those straight off the printer, or are you coding the prints or anything before you actually run them?
That's a great question. I've actually done both. Again, in that okay, it's kind of spread across a couple posts on the Drydocks forums, but I did find I had to coat at one point the front bulkhead, and that was on the older design. It's actually painted gray. Oh, actually, that's one thing I should show you guys. It might be helpful, it might not. I don't know. Let's go grab that stupid thing again.
Yeah, this is really interesting because I'm building my first one at the moment, so I want to do it right. Use all the experience from all you guys who know what you're doing.
Well, I wouldn't
Hopefully
say I
not,
know what I'm doing.
hopefully not have it in its first run down to the bottom of the lake and never get it back again.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I use 100% infill.
Yep.
Um,
Always 100%, never infill. Yeah.
yeah, and even then, some just depending on the design, sometimes they'll still leak, so sometimes you got to coat them. Anywhere where I'm trying to go with this is resin is always the better way to do it, or casting them. But let me try and flip this around. So some of them, yes, I've had to coat them. Some of them, no, I can just run them straight out. Here's the front of this new watertight cylinder, and there's these countersunk wells, or maybe about 3/16 quarter-inch deep. Those, after these get this is just dry assembled right now, but these will get super glued in, and I'm not depending on the super glue to keep them in place. That's just to seal it, because then I go back with potting compound and I fill up these wells.
Oh yeah.
And that works really well for sealing that off. Again, here's like a pressure equalizing port for the forward thing that'll get the potting compound in there too. This bulkhead fitting for that 12-volt ground and 5-volt, this whole assembly gets filled full of potting compound. It's actually built as a, well, anyway, I'm not going to fight with that. But yeah, see, I'm kind of doing something stupid here. Well, not stupid, but just different. I got a main ballast tank that acts like Dave's design. It's just a snort system, and this is literally just a sledgehammer. This does the bulk of the what is it, ballasting of the boat. At either end of the watertight cylinder is these piston tanks, and that handles. You can run this boat either as a static diving boat, or you can run it as a dynamic diving boat, or somewhere in between. It all depends on how you set it up, or how when you plop it in the water, which way you want to go. You can ballast for different water conditions, whatever. But anyway, where I'm going with this is because I'm running pistons, and granted, they're not as big as like an angle style piston, but they still develop a lot of positive pressure inside of these sections. So you find air leaks, or if you have a printed bulk end cap, I mean, you find out really quick if it leaks. if you see bubbles coming out when it's pressurized, or if when you're you're ideally starting at a, what is it? Kind of lost for words here. Anyway, when you first put the cylinder water, everything's equalized ambient pressure.
Yeah.
But so you shouldn't have any negative pressure in there. You're only really going to have positive.
Unless you've got a leak, in which case when you cycle your tank, you'll be sucking water in.
Yeah. And before, when I changed the design a little bit, I put the servos out in the wet. I was having really good success with those cup seals that Bob sells, or the lip seals for keeping everything kind of happy. But I still chose just to for the heck of it, just as an experiment, to put all the servos out in the wet and eliminate a couple more penetrations.
I'm actually a huge proponent of that, and there's some builds coming up that I've got that are going to be more heavily leveraging waterproof servos. The thing to note about those cup seals is they're only designed to seal pressure from one direction. So actually you would almost need to flip them around. Yeah. Because your air pressure is coming from the
I used to
blowing out rather than the outside water pushing back in. I just wanted to make a quick comment on that 3D printing thing. I've printed a ton of watertight cylinder components, including all the prototypes for the new line of watertight cylinders. There's two things to note. Any penetrations where you make like a hole, the way these FDM printers work is it's like when you color a coloring book, you always color the outside first, right? So you make this like circle around and then it fills the inside. And sometimes when it does that circle, it doesn't do a complete 100% infill between the shading and the outline, if that makes sense. What I found, the biggest game changer for doing that is you got to bump your temperature up. So if PLA typically melts, if you're printing at 190, I typically print at 220 or higher. So that plastic becomes a lot more molten, and it'll flow and fuse much better. You just can't get like crazy overhangs and all that, but you don't need that for a bulkhead. It's just a round disc, for lack of a better term. So if you do want to print your end cap, bump your temperature up, and that'll help the plastic fuse together and stop those little micro pores from showing up.
Hey,
how much
or Dwayne in there. What functionality will your submarine have that you need to have the microprocessor? Like mine detects leaks, will flash the sub ID kit in the masthead light, blow the ballast. It detects pulse width loss, flashes the light, blows the ballast, runs the sub ID beacon, kind of simple stuff. What does yours do?
Yeah, let me answer that, but just really quick to kind of talk what Bob was talking about, the end caps, for people following that. Bob, you want to tell folks how much you bump the temperature up for printing end caps? If somebody might find that helpful.
Yeah, well, I touched on it real briefly, but I would go on the upper, because when you buy the filament, it'll give you a range. I would go right up to the maximum. Like I think PLA, the lowest temperatures I think I've seen is like 175 or 180. But like I said, I don't usually print at anything under 220 degrees for PLA.
Yeah.
And then, Bob, don't you 100% on the infill on your end caps?
100%.
Stay 100%. Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. Yeah, I've never in my whole I've never once printed in PLA. I've never done it. Anyway, Mike, as far as the Arduino goes, I gotta bear with me. I gotta kind of remember everything it does. I actually really don't. First thing I do is I read all the PPM signals coming in through the receiver, route most of them, not all of them, through the Arduino. And I can set up automatic functions on any of those channels that it's doing. Yeah, it's doing a lot, and I don't want to burn up too much of the time on the DiveTribe here of what it does. But I'd have to go back and look at all the crazy things I got going on. But I've almost reached maximum program capacity on that.
No kidding. Wow. Yeah, I'd be really interested to hear just kind of the stuff you got it doing. Is it automatic nav routines or just kind of trim stuff or depth control?
So sensor wise and all stuff, it could be set up for automatic nav. I'm not going to do that. I'm using it I'm taking a 9-channel remote and essentially turning it into probably like a 14, 15 channel remote, just with some of the programming, using one channel and splitting it up like 5 or 6 ways. And then it's the architecture of the software. It's kind of like if this knob is moved to this direction, it enters one function, and then now these other 2 knobs have a control. You can move that same knob a different direction, and now these other 2 channels have this other control.
Yeah, totally get. Also, then you can make logical decisions based on those, and if you have multiple, then you can have all sorts of branches and sequels. Yeah, I totally get it. Yeah,
and the way that this boat is set up is you can run it like a dead simple submarine. Just everything's manual, everything's, everything has a channel, or you can get into some more, or you can flip a couple switches and get into some of the more exotic stuff that it's capable of doing.
The things I bought was for the BS2. It's probably hard to see through the thing. It's basically a moisture detector. It's a level sensor. So I want to read this, see if I can stick this in the ballast tank, and then if I don't fully blow the ballast tank or fully vent it, the microcontroller knows that, and it will continue to either blow or vent for me. So I always achieve full or So I'm gonna play with that a little bit too.
I just look for the bubbles.
Yep.
Right. Yeah.
All right. I need to make sure we turn this over. We've had like some awesome conversations, but it's been focused on like maybe 2 projects. So I want to make sure we leave some time for other people to chime in. But like Nick and Mike, obviously you can chime in together. And Nick's got a ton of great information on the forums. Mike, if you have a chance to take a look at that, he's got a lot of really cool stuff posted up there. So anybody else got anything? Actually, one quick thing. In typical fashion, I have to leave at 4, but Jason, Ed, and Steve, is Steve still here? And Vaughn, Subcom Lone Star, that site, I've been playing with it. I don't know if you saw that email that I shot out to you. Get registered and play with it if you could. I would love to get some feedback on it, because I put a member gallery and a member registration and a member page and all sorts of fun stuff in there.
For those of you with 1/48 scale U-boats, I found a site in Czechoslovakia for the victory flags.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I'll post that up. They're all metal, very, very small, difficult to work with, but beautiful.
Oh, there's like scale versions.
Scale 1/48.
Nice.
Yeah.
I need some help.
All right, Ernie.
I bought a 172 sturgeon from you, and I need some help. I can't find anybody to build a sail for me. The guy that had the boat before me screwed the pooch on this sail. He glued the spare water planes in place. The bottom is so it can't take a snorkel head or the gearing in there. And when he started cleaning the head out, he started at the electronic countermeasures mast, which I don't know why he would put that in there. I guess he thought it's where they stood. But I talked to Dave and we tried to find somebody, and that didn't work out. And so what I guess my only option is I'll buy the printed what you need to print the 172 sturgeon out. I need somebody to print me a sail. I don't have a printer. Does anybody got a printer that might want to help me? I mean, I'll pay you to do it.
Yeah, no, if we, I mean, that's no problem. I can print that in resin at high definition for you. That's not a problem at all.
Well then, okay, I'll talk to you about that later then. I'll give you a call next week, okay?
Yeah, do that for sure. No,
okay.
we'll hook you up.
Yeah, well, it was just one of these things where I've been trying to, find somebody to work on it because there's just not enough room the way the cell is right now. And it's sort of like, what am I gonna do? So,
And if you're just looking for the sale, you don't need to buy all those files. We'll get you hooked up.
well, I'll call you next week.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
I got something.
All right.
Last meeting, I couldn't quite get my first person view system to show the work on the monitor. Well, I got it working now. The camera, the same ones you'll see in the drones, it's inside this watertight container. So if I can get the monitor up there, you can see this handsome dude right here. And so far I'm getting a range of about 100 foot, and the transmitter's only pooping out about 250 milliwatts.
Mhm.
So I can up that by going to 2 cells. Probably fry the camera, but we'll see. Anyway, we're making progress, and I hope to have that system working at the next Subfest.
Oh yeah, for sure. That'd be awesome. You bet. Very cool.
Bob, you got one of those enclosures now, right?
I have 2. Yeah, absolutely. So there's two things I want to do. I want to take one. I got a couple of cameras. I'm kind of curious to see how small I can get that enclosure, and then run the power in from a remote source so that we could potentially mount that in a. Of course, you're putting that in a 23 that has acres of room inside.
Yeah.
But if we could get it into something more, space challenged. As a drop-in system would be super interesting. Yeah. Yeah, cool, for sure.
Yeah,
I'm gonna be taking off in a minute, so it's your last chance to yell at me before I leave you guys to do your own damage. No? Oh, good. All right. I got my plane back. I'm super excited. I don't know if you guys follow it on Facebook or whatever. I picked it up Thursday, flew it back from Florida. So the airborne submarine transport vehicle is now back up and running again.
Can you bring that 12-foot Gato out?
I was thinking maybe I'll like strap it to the roof. That's got to be legal, right?
Hey man, airspeed is life and altitude is your friend, Bob. Just remember that. It's the best I can give you.
When I was in Florida, I hooked up with my friend. He used to own a chain of Pung stores. And we were next to one of his old stores. He wanted to stop in, and we went inside, and sure enough, sitting in the corner was a 50 caliber machine gun. It's like 8 feet long, with the tripod and everything. I'm like, man, that would look awesome bolted to the front of my airplane. I don't care if it works or not. I think I just want to mount it to the front and give people pause.
ATF would care.
Well, maybe, probably, yeah.
Yeah, what kind of a shop could you have in prison?
Well, I've got a 50 cal you could borrow, Bob.
Yeah.
Yeah, Barrett.
Well,
50 cal sniper rifle.
Yikes. Yeah, I'm not a huge gun person. I have one when my son and I were into like sport shooting and stuff like that. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, there's a little kickback there.
All right, I'm gonna leave you guys play. I'm gonna turn things over to Dave, and we'll catch you guys next time.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob. Catch you next time.